Redwood City Child Care and Early Education Planner and Coordinator, and I work with the community to improve our local system. I want to thank you for the actions you've taken today, and also just to illustrate the potential impacts. The largest subsidized provider in our community is the Redwood City School District that has had one of the original Title V contracts since the mid-1940s and has built that program to serving over 700 preschool-age children who they're getting ready to enter our school district. After last summer's cuts, they lost about 125 spaces in the preschool program, and if there were further cuts this year, they would close another 5 to 6 classrooms at least. The lower reimbursement rate is a serious problem for the school district. It's very difficult to provide the services in a school district on the reimbursement rate of about $700 a month when our market rate in Redwood City goes from $850 to $1,300 a month for full-time care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Good afternoon. Scott Moore with Preschool California. We applaud and thank you for the action that you took today. We are strongly opposed to both the restructuring and to the cuts. Thank you.
Hi, Janina Perez with Children Now. We are also firmly opposed to the proposed restructuring and cuts. We thank you for affirming that early learning is a key component of our overall educational system. We will only increase our impact of all of our investments in K-12 and higher ed if we take a birth to 20 approach. We also ask you, when you are looking at general child care and its interaction with state preschool, that you not lose sight of the infant toddler slots as well as the school age slots. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one of our panel presenters.
Thank you for letting me jump in line. My name is Fritzi Gregg. I'm a program director for Continuing Development Incorporated Child Development Centers. I'll try and be really quick and whittle down what I have. We have 138 centers across California serving children birth to 12. Currently, we serve 4,200 children in our general child contract and 2,750 in our state preschool contract. Our business model is to provide school-age programs wrapped around state preschool. 3 years ago, we lost our latchkey contract, and then over the last 2 years, we've lost funding to general child migrant and state preschool. Last year, we closed 20 centers, and that resulted in a loss of 2,200 children. 50% of our infant toddler programs were closed last year. We have one full day, full year infant program left in our agency. I also have to mention the 182 teachers and 30 support staff that were laid off with those center closures. We really don't have anywhere to go with the 10% standard reimbursement rate cut. We can't cut anything else. And so if we wanted to keep our doors open, it would mean we would have to cut salaries and benefits. And no one wants to do that to staff. A lot of our staff are low income themselves and have subsidies for child care. So how can we look them in the face and say, we have to cut you by almost $2 an hour?
Oh my God.
So that's not really an option. With the elimination of direct slots, we would lose 700 school-age children who will become latchkey. We will lose 420 children to the reduction of income eligibility if that were to go through. We also operate a voucher program, an AP program in El Dorado County. And in the last 2 years of cuts, we've seen a reduction of 50% fewer low-income children receiving services. A point I want to make, too, is that we, like a lot of the providers in this room, serve families of low income and middle income in the same program. So all of those centers are at risk. we're not 100% subsidized in our centers. We serve a definite mix in the majority of them. In CDC's eyes, the biggest evil is the restructuring of the child care infrastructure. It will be the most devastating thing that can happen to us as a provider. We would much rather, like many of the providers have stated, especially yesterday, take cuts directly to slots, but maintain an infrastructure that when the state has money, we can rebuild. We worked too hard with legislators over the past 3 decades to develop a system of not just quality, but of accountability. Please don't eliminate that hard work. We must have quality and access. It's not one or the other. It has to be both. So this is not just about money. It's about our priorities as Californians. And many people have already said this in this room. With the budget cuts and the restructuring of our infrastructure, families will pay immediately through loss of jobs and loss of quality programs. The state will pay down the road. As more disadvantaged children enter the public school system unprepared, childhood obesity and diabetes rates increase, teen pregnancies rise, the achievement gap becomes wider, and the juvenile crime rate increases. Thank you so much for inviting me here to be on a panel. I'm sorry I have to catch my plane. Thank you.
No, thank you for your patience, and we are sorry that it's running so long, but obviously it's a very, very important issue. Next speaker, and I'll just say this is the end of the line. We're not going to add anyone else to the line, so that will be it. Yes.
Hi, my name is Carmen Rogers, and I've been an educator for 32 years, and I work for Cadango in Alameda County. I just want to thank you for rejecting the governor's proposal and to continue to support quality child care.
Thank you. Next speaker. And we will have one final panel when public comment ends.
Good afternoon. My name is Reina Escobar. I'm a full-time student. I go to Las Positas College. I'm working on my degree for my major's in business administration. But without childcare, I will not be able to finish my school, find a better job, and provide for my children. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Hilda Moya. I am here with Parent Voices of Alameda, and I live in Alameda. I have 3 beautiful daughters. I'm a single mother, and I would like to let you know that I am. It'll be very, very hard for me to be able to help my children raise them. And I wanted to say that without the child care that is being provided to me and my children, I won't be able to continue working and be able to provide for them. And I want to thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk to you, and thank you for rejecting the cuts on child care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tasha. I live in Hayward. I'm here with Parent Voices. I want to thank you for rejecting the cuts to child care. Without quality child care, I am unable to work and support my 2 children. CalWorks makes a difference for me. Without CalWorks and child care, I would be jobless, homeless, and hopeless. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Shantine Fauntleroy, and I live in Hayward, and I am a parent with the Parent Voices. I am a product and a testament of what a parent can achieve when they have quality, affordable child care education. Having subsidized child care enabled me to go to college and earn an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree of science, and a teaching credential, and also a master's degree in science. With the child care services I received throughout my education, I am now able to give back and be a productive member of society by paying my fair share of taxes and by working as a physical education teacher, and I am educating our children in the Bay Area. As Parent Voices would say, child care keeps California working, parents earning, and children learning. Let's work collaboratively together to come up with a plan that works for our parents, families, and children. Thank you for rejecting the proposed cuts to child care education and keeping child care in the Department of Education.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Greppy. I'm with Parent Voices, Southern Alameda County. I have 2 testimonies from people that were in the hall that were unable to stay from Redwood City. I'll leave them. And then I also have 15 stories from parents that couldn't take the day off of work or they would lose their jobs. And child care is what enables them to continue to work, support their families, and thrive. So thank you for rejecting the cuts today.
Thank you. Thank you for waiting in line. Next.
Hola, mi nombre es Karina. El día de hoy mi hija asiste al preschool y si mi hija no aplica para estar en un centro, ella se perjudicaría y no es justo. Ella ahora no puede decidir qué es lo mejor para ella y por eso estoy aquí. Y sé que con el sueldo que yo tengo no me alcanzaría para pagar. ¿Y qué hago? ¿La dejo que pierda sus 2 primeros años de aprendizaje? No es fácil, como lo ven otras personas. No todos tenemos la fortuna de tener un sueldo alto como ustedes, porque a veces son tan injustos en las decisiones que toman. Ustedes también tienen hijos y deben de saber qué es lo mejor para ellos. Thank you.
Next speaker.
Hola, mi nombre es María Cristóbal. Tengo 2 hijos que asisten a este programa. El día de hoy vengo para hablar por ellos, porque no es justo que les quiten un programa que les ayuda a su aprendizaje. Ellos son el futuro de este país y creo que nadie tiene el derecho de decidir por ellos si van a ser alguien o no, si van a tomar malas decisiones el día de mañana. Solamente les pido que escuchen sus voces y la de nosotros que somos padres de familia. Gracias.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Claudia Moreno. I live in Hayward. I have a 3-year-old son. And I'm just asking you to no more cuttings in care and education. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dolly Guraya. I work with Kitango Preschool, serving children 0 to 5 in Alameda County. As an early childhood educator and an advocate, I have seen children's lives transformed by early childhood education programs and by what families together can learn also. So cutting their funding will do effectively nothing to change our state's debt status. These cuts are drastic and would be devastating for millions of children. So I wonder why the future of our children doesn't seem to matter to policy leaders. And I want to ask, what security do you provide for teachers who are working enthusiastically toward their degrees? And then how is the state going to justify the long-lasting effect that would cause to these children? I urge all the leaders to do it right by protecting our nation's education philosophy in early years.
Thank you.
If we eliminate them, we'll fail our children. So thank you so much today for, I want to maintain the integrity that we have worked so hard to develop. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Deborah Cosio. I'm also a teacher at Kitango Preschool. We serve ages 0 to 5 in Alameda County. I feel it's grim news for America's children. Children did not cause the recession, but they certainly are feeling the effects of it. State cuts have been devastating, and the end is not yet in sight. Policymakers may think that reductions in state staffing, furloughs, and cuts across the board have no impact, but families with children all see differently. I want to thank you for listening to us and supporting us today also. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and members. My name is Elisa Bryan. I work for Cambridge Community Center, and I just have a very short, important message. We need a high quality full-time funding for our child care. When parents work and learn, the children can attend school and learn. So as a teacher, our goal is to support and prepare these children to succeed. So please save our children and teachers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ralph Cortez. I work for Go Kids of Incorporated out of Gilroy, California, and I've been working with children for approximately 11 years, and I just want to say thank you for rejecting the governor's state proposal, and also want to add that these children's lives, they're at stake. Their hearts are broken when we close centers. For example, one of our centers closed down in Morgan Hill that I was working at, and my children approached me and said, "Mr. Ralph, don't close. We'll behave. We'll listen to you. Don't close. Don't close." I had to explain to them it's nothing that had to do with them. So a lot of these children are walking away thinking that it's their problem, it's their fault that we're closing down centers, and that they're not wanted. They go home, they sit there and think, what did I do wrong? And that sits on them. That affects them in their lives. I have a daughter of 2. Both of them attend preschool. One of them is already 17, and she's today a 4.0 graduate. Almost going to be graduating, but with the 4.0. My 2-year-old, she's a toddler going in. She's right now doing cutting and shapes, and I've seen the development as the time went by. So it's a very big effect, and these children's lives, like I said, are at risk. Their future's out. They're our future, and they're at risk. So please, whoever's hearing our voices, just think about that. And the cities are from me that were submitted. I had given them that all that information's on there and explains it. Children's talking, so please listen to them and please view them and give it some kind of a thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here.
Madam Chair and members, I'm Dolores Duran Flores with the California School Employees Association. We are here also in opposition to the governor's cuts and the proposed restructuring. I want to thank you for the action you took on that item today, as well as just associate ourselves with the comments made by the Superintendent of Public Instruction. We share those concerns and let you know that we represent a lot of the employees that actually work in these Title V programs operated by LEAs who stand to lose quite a bit. So we're not only concerned about the children and the family, but also the impact it's going to have on the workers in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Angie Garling with the Child Care Planning Council of Alameda County. Thank you for the actions that you've taken today. I meet monthly with our state contractors, about 30 of them, and federal contractors representing about $150 million in subsidized child care. 3,400 children in Alameda County stand to lose their child care under the governor's proposals. And I just want to tell you, for the items that you've left open, to please think about the consequences of the cuts, particularly the reduction in the standard reimbursement rate, and that the rate for reimbursement right now in Alameda County is currently lower than what we pay for doggy daycare. So is that really what we want for our children? Thank you.
Thank you.
Deneen Kovalevsky, representing the California Alternative Payment Program Association. First off, thanks to the committee and staff for all the work that you've done in meeting with me in the last couple of weeks. Secondly, I want to give recognition to Superintendent Tom Torlakson, who's convened a work group on child care and is being very visionary in wanting to do things differently and to look at serving children from birth on within the Department of Education. I think if we go back to CalWorks and we look at Education Code 8200, when we created child development, that section addressed everything that Assemblymember Chesbro said earlier about emotional, well-being, physical. It's all in the Education Code. It all ought to be with the Department of Education. Lastly, I want to say to Assemblymember Nastandi, we have alternative payment programs in every county throughout the state of California. These programs have been in existence for 30-plus years. They know how to do eligibility. They're efficient at it. And I can tell you that these programs exist and families know about them, and they can do eligibility for more than just child care. They're going to be around for a long time to come. Rely on them. Counties do. And to the governor, realignment, if it were real in any way, and you have existing infrastructures in counties that are already doing things that work in an effective way, then out the gate, make it a sole source contract to those local community entities. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite our final panel forward, and thank you so much for your patience. Lynn Carolee, Marcy Whitebrook, and Michael Olnick. And I probably mispronounced all your names, but you can reintroduce yourselves. And I just deeply appreciate the fact that you've sat here for hours and hours. I hope that your love of the topic sustained you, and that you share the values we have too of hearing from the parents themselves and how important that is, and that they had waited a long time. So thank you very much. I believe we'll start with Lynn. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm really pleased to be here, and I actually have learned a lot in being part of this hearing today. I do have a plane to catch, so I've taken my very eloquent written statement that I was going to give to you, and I'm going to try to telescope it to a few key points, but I'd be happy to either follow up with questions in the time that I have or follow up after today with anything that we aren't able to get to where my expertise can be of value. My name is Lynn Carrolley. I'm a senior economist at the RAND Corporation, where I've been conducting policy research on early care and education for more than 15 years, much of it centered on California. And in addressing you in this hearing today, I do want to point out that I'm representing myself. My views do not reflect those of RAND or any of its sponsors, and as is RAND's policy, I'm not going to comment on any particular legislation. I do want to say why I, as an economist, how I come to this issue and why I believe that the state of California should continue to invest in high-quality child care and early education opportunities for its children, particularly those who are most vulnerable. And there were several key points that I wanted to make, which I'm going to telescope because in part you've heard them before. First of all, we know that these first few years of life are critical for children's development, and that's development across a range of dimensions, not just their academic skills, but social, emotional, behavioral, physical. We also know that increasingly children are spending these years in care by someone other than their parents, and that's for a variety of reasons. I'd be happy to give you numbers if you're interested. But the main point there is that that represents both a challenge and an opportunity, because we know that the quality of the environments that they're in matters, and poor quality care can actually be harmful. And so the challenge is to make sure that those environments that children are in are as high quality as possible and actually promote development, so that's not just doing no harm, but actually an opportunity to help children learn in these various ways that we've been talking about today. And we also know, and I can tell you as an economist from my own research, that those kinds of investments in high quality care and early learning opportunities actually pay off. And so there's a return to the public sector from making those investments and the kinds of savings that you'll see down the road. So in light of all that evidence, what the states have been doing, and California is no exception, have been focusing on early care and learning opportunities in terms of expanding access, particularly to those children who can benefit the most, but in expanding access, most importantly, focusing on quality and how to ensure that the kinds of opportunities and settings that children are in are as high quality as possible, and also setting up critical infrastructure components that make sure that these systems work, not only for families, but also for providers. And in California, that effort has largely been vested in the California Department of Education, which recognizes that these early care and learning settings that children are in are really the first part of their education. So education today is not just K to 12, someone mentioned birth to 20. We really are talking about education that begins early, and that recognition is consistent with having these services within a Department of Education that can work on the alignment and the continuity of learning from birth onwards. Now, of course, California faces challenges in this current fiscal environment, and I would argue that in light of those challenges, the focus needs to be, first of all, on how to ensure that as many children as possible who can benefit from high-quality early learning opportunities have access to those programs. And today we know that the children who are even eligible, just a small fraction of those who are even eligible actually get access to the kinds of developmentally oriented programs that in California is offered through Title V or through Head Start, or through Title I programs. Those are the programs that have the highest quality standards, that have the highest expectations, and are developmentally oriented. That's not to say that children in other settings, and particularly those who are supported with vouchers, are not getting access to quality, but there's not the same incentive and the same requirement to focus on quality. And data we've collected do show indeed that there are quality differences in California between the Title V centers and the rest of children in center-based settings. And so those differences are important. And those are the quality differences that are going to ensure that these early learning settings are promoting children's development in ways that we see the kinds of economic returns that we know are possible. So with that, let me just stop again because time is short, and I'd be happy to answer any questions in the time that I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if Assemblymember Nastande has any. I don't know if you have any data around the economic impacts. I mean, I know you can't speak specifically, but Have you done general data of what happens? I mean, what happens when we close centers down? What have you seen?
Well, so the kinds of analyses we've done have looked at the economic returns to making these investments in early education programs, starting as young as birth and then continuing on to school entry. And I would argue that in the case of California, to the extent that fewer children have access to those kinds of settings, that you're going to see it in terms of reduced rates of preparation when they enter school. And that means you're going to face higher costs within the K-12 education system. I like to say that early education is part of K-12 education reform, because by preparing children for school, you're going to see less grade repetition, less use of special education, higher rates of high school graduation. And eventually the economy sees the consequences of fewer children entering school ready to learn, because those high school dropouts don't bring the same skills to the labor market. And likewise, just in general, the economy will see those impacts in terms of its future workforce. I would also argue that there are collateral effects. You've heard some of the discussion today that we're talking about when you're looking at cuts, not only the effects on families in those programs and those centers and providers offering services, but there are those ripple effects throughout the economy. And there are studies that have looked at the ways in which the child care industry is part of the fabric of local economies, and when you take away resources that are supporting that industry, you have those larger consequences. I don't happen to have estimates on those numbers, but I know they're out there.
Thank you. Member Stott.
Yeah, how do you account for other factors throughout their life? When you say there's good effects or bad effects, depending if they went there or not, what other factors do you measure in that?
So the research, what's wonderful about the field of early care and education is that we have a lot of really rigorous research evidence that uses the gold standard of randomized controlled trials. And so we can see if we randomly assign a child to a high-quality, say, preschool program 1 or 2 years before they start kindergarten, and another group of kids who are randomly assigned not to participate in those programs. When we follow the trajectories of those two groups of children, the study design ensures that what we're measuring is the effect of the program itself and not all the other factors that we know can influence children. Of course, parents matter. Other aspects in which children are influenced in their lives matter. But what these kinds of studies show is that those high-quality early learning settings are actually making a difference in terms of their development and subsequent growth and progress.
So you're saying you accounted for parental involvement or non-involvement or something like that. You looked at those factors, nutrition, whatever it might be, extended family, all those things.
Right. And again, those are things that matter, and we'd like to have all of those be working in the positive direction and supporting children in their development.
And I guess, and I won't dispute those findings, and I think here in the budget committee we have a problem of not enough money, so we have to cut. So it's not, I don't know if I'll dispute that, but I guess I might question though the philosophy of, I guess you could say, yes, if you take a child at birth and the state comes in and say, we know how to take care and make this a perfect child going all the way through till 20 or whatever, okay, maybe you can pull that off. But is that really what we want the state doing? At what point do we account for maybe the state doesn't always have a role in children?
What I would say is that what we're talking about here are programs that are voluntary for parents to avail themselves of if they have need because of their work or other reasons why they would want to see their children enrolled. None of this is suggesting that the state can do a better job than parents or that the state should intervene in lives of children when that's not what the families want. What this is saying is that there are opportunities to provide programs and services to families and children that we know are going to make a difference in their lives, and that we have evidence that we can do that in a high-quality way, and that investing in those kinds of programs and services will make a difference. If you look at California, for example, currently programs like Title V and Early Head Start reach only a small fraction of infants and toddlers. So it's not as if all infants and toddlers all of a sudden are in state-funded, state-directed programs and somehow taken out of their family context. So what we're really talking about is opportunities for families to take advantage of if they choose to do so, but we want to do it in a way that we know that those kinds of resources are used effectively and to have the greatest benefit possible.
Thank you.
Just one quick question, and then we'll let you go because I know you need to leave for your flight, right? How about the economic impact effects? What have you found in your studies of that?
I have to say it's not an area that I'm an expert on, and actually others on the panel may be able to comment in that regard. But as an economist, I can tell you that there will be broader economic effects when you see these kinds of resources that are supporting families in their access to child care, supporting the providers, to the extent that that families are no longer able to use those child care services. It affects their ability to work, which affects their own earnings. It has consequences for the providers. For many of them, there won't be substitute families to step in and take their place. And you heard cases of providers that would be forced to close. And that may either be because families aren't there or the reimbursement rates that they're getting aren't sufficient to cover their costs, and they have no other avenues for making up those differences. And all of those, you can imagine that those providers and those families, that affects their incomes and the resources that they bring to the marketplace in terms of the goods and services that they in turn buy. So you will see ripple effects throughout the economy. I'd be happy to follow up to see what kinds of research evidence is out there that might give you estimates that would help inform that, because I know they are out there, and from what I've seen as part of the discussion today, that hasn't been part of the numbers that you all have access to or are seeing to date.
Exactly. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here. All right. We'll move on now to Marcy Whitebook.
I'm Marcy Whitebook. I'm the director and senior researcher at the Center for the Study of Child Care Employment at the University of California at Berkeley. And I, too, am trying to figure out how to telescope my comments. I started my career as a preschool teacher, and one of the things I learned early on was that you always carried a snack with you when you went out with a bunch of children, because they get tired and cranky, and I wish I had snacks for all of us right now, because I think we're all kind of tired and cranky, at least I am. So that being said, I'm very honored to be here, and I'm glad I have an opportunity to talk with you. I want to just talk a little bit about the history of these programs, and then I'll go on to talk more about some of the things we know about child development. But when I entered the field professionally in the 1970s, California was the envy of the country. It was the only state that managed to save the programs that were set up during World War II for mothers to go to work. Think Rosie the Riveter, and it kept them after the war, but it kept them because the legislature made a decision, and tireless parent and early educators, lobbied the legislature for many, many years before it took 11 years for the programs to become permanent. So, we have sort of a long, almost 70-year history behind us around this program. But the reason this program was the envy of the country was not just because we saved it, but was because of its design. And what people looked to and were just so excited about the California program was that it had a twofold purpose. It did not divorce parental needs and children's needs, and it basically was based on two principles, one being that early education is the foundation for later learning, and two is that you can't, what happens to children and children's well-being is linked to their parents. And so child care was early learning, and early learning was child care from the beginning in California. Since then, of course, our system has grown a lot more complex, and we've had a lot more programs, come on, and we've created the voucher system and different things. And that's been very good in many ways, because we've been able to serve many more families and serve families in terms of the circumstances they've had. But it has had the effect in some ways of making our publicly funded services in California more bifurcated in purpose and service, with funding focused sometimes on serving just children, or sometimes focusing just on parents, and not bringing those together. So that means that sometimes, and programs have had very different standards guiding them. So there's been a certain inequity in our system, and this is true in other parts of the country as well. And so the quality of services that children have access to are not always of equal quality, and that's sort of a problem, to begin with. And I just want to say, and I know other people have said it today, that when we redefine the income eligibility limits for the services. We don't redefine need. I mean, the need is still there whether we do it or not. And really the people in the state who are really very at risk are people working low-income jobs who can't get subsidized child care. And this obviously would be more of a problem with this proposal. What I want to say is that there are some things we need to do to fix our child care system. But it really can't be done totally from a cost-cutting point of view. I mean, I understand that we have to do that, but it's short-sighted to do that. And I think what Lynn was trying to say is that the economic research basically says is if you make these short-term decisions to do it, you're going to pay for them later down the line in terms of children's development. And I would also say that taking this very diverse, kind of confusing system to begin with and chopping it up into 58 more pieces in the jigsaw puzzle is not going to give us better quality, equity, efficiency, or necessarily lower costs. And we've learned that from states that have done a county-driven system. So there's information out there about that. But really, I think the thing to understand is the bifurcated system that we have, where sometimes programs are for children and sometimes are for parents. California didn't create that problem. I mean, that's a problem with our national policy around these issues too. But what's been unique about California is California has tried to sort of minimize that split between child care and early learning by keeping everything in the Department of Education and with an emphasis on early learning and school readiness for most all of the children throughout the system. And so the current proposal would really split that apart, as others have said today. And again, I think the Department of Social Services has a lot of things that they do well, but we really do need people with expertise in early care and education overseeing what we're doing with our young children. The theories upon, when the people started these programs in the 40s here in California, they were child development people who were behind saying, let's design a program that's educational and is child care. But those were really theories. We didn't have much early childhood science in the 40s and 50s. But now we have a lot. And it's interesting that those theoretical assumptions about what children needed, the science has turned out to prove that they're right. Then, in fact, we know now that those early years, the very, very first years of life, are fundamental to children's later learning, and that every single day of a child's life in those first few years, they're building essentially the architecture of their brains that is going to really tell us so much about what their lives are going to be like and their ultimate health is going to be like as adults. And so the quality of those early experiences matter. And I think what Lynn was referring to is that there's a very large body of research that shows that when children are low income, quality matters for all children, but when children face multiple risks already, if they get into poor quality care, then it really burdens them unnecessarily. And if they get into good quality care, it actually gives them a leg up and helps them have, to succeed. So the idea that we would create a system that doesn't attend to early learning or sort of push our system in that direction really just goes in the face of the science that we have. And, people tend to think of, we can wait till preschool, but in fact, the science is most clear about how much of that early learning happens in the very first years of life. So we can't just think, we'll deal with the preschool programs and then just forget about the infants. The other thing, and this is the one thing I thought that the people who testified today just, in very moving ways made very clear. But the other part of the science that's become a lot more evident in the last number of years is that children grow up in an environment of relationships, and what happens in those relationships actually affects the structures of their brains. So thinking about their parents and their teachers is not a distraction from children's needs, but actually thinking what's happening to their parents and teachers or providers or other caregivers is actually fundamental to what's happening to children's development. And so when children face a lot of economic hardship and a lot of stress, what they refer to as toxic stress, it really disrupts their development. And the proposed reforms, and I think people spoke today much better than I can about it, really do create an enormous amount of stress on families. When parents have to scramble to hold on to their jobs and maybe their housing. I mean, so many people talked about being homeless and wonder where they're going to get their food. That is really hard for children's overall development. And when people have their hopes dashed about a better future, because they can't go to school, that's really hard on children's development too. So, we really have to be thinking about that, and there's a feedback loop there. They're in an environment of relationships, and when you disrupt what's happening to the parents, you're disrupting what's happening to the children. The other thing I want to talk a little bit about is the people who are working each day taking care of our children. At one point there were about 100,000 people in California who were working in early care and education directly as teachers or providers. It's probably a lot less now because of the cutbacks. But for the children who remain in care, they're going to be exposed to a lot of change and instability because their caregivers are going to change, programs are going to close, people are going to lose their jobs. And that kind of turnover in caregiving, we think of it, it's turnover, but children experience it as loss. And that loss is something that affects their development, their sense of well-being. And I thought the man who talked about his children thinking it was their fault that they lost their child care, it was a really poignant example of, the damage that happens to children when their lives become chaotic. The other thing I want to say, and most of my research has been focused on teachers and providers and the quality, what they need to be able to offer quality care, and a lot about the wages and working conditions. And we're asking teachers and providers to do so much more now than we did when I was doing it 35 years ago. And the very idea that we keep asking them to do more for less really is unconscionable. And it also means they can't do their jobs very well. And it also means that they're worrying, too, because they're all wondering if they're going to have jobs. As Lynn alluded to, around the country, there's a big move to try and improve quality. And most of that emphasis is really focused on helping people who work with children each day get better at what they do and learn new things. They have to see if children's language skills are being disrupted, if they have behavior problems, what's going on. They have to try and support their emerging literacy, numeracy, scientific understanding, all these things we're asking teachers to do. And so, so that's why the quality improvement programs are so important. And it's true, the way we have our quality improvement now, probably could be streamlined or fixed in some ways. But we also have to remember part of why we have such a complex system of quality improvement is because we have all these programs with different standards, different expectations for caregivers. So in those thousands of people, we have people who need very different things in terms of where they are in terms of their own education and training. And just splitting that up and sending it to the counties is not really going to help us address that. So I just want to close with a little, I guess I started saying I was hungry, and I guess I'm ending on nutrition here. But we know that a diet with lots of fruits and vegetables combined with regular activity is essential for healthy development. It's harder to achieve such a diet when you have limited and modest resources, but it's not impossible. And nobody today would encourage children, because of what we know, to sit in front of the TV all day and eat fries and soda. And so we similarly can't go for fast food childcare just because it seems like we'll get more, it's convenient, and it's cheaper. And so I think as California moves to, figure out what we're going to do to address our public education problems, close the achievement gap, develop our next generation workforce, we need to come up with a better balanced reform proposal that's not just crafted on a short-term savings, but sort of builds on these long-held principles of child development and now scientific evidence that meet our minimal daily requirements for a healthy future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a great analogy. I don't know if you have a question or at this time. That was really very insightful. We'd like to go to Michael Olnick and have you give your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I realize that I'm all that stands between Marcy's dinner and your dinner. So, and I think that a lot of what I'm going to say has already been said. But I'm Mike Olnick. I'm the CEO of the Child Care Resource Center. We're the alternative payment resource and referral agency that serves the northern end of Los Angeles County, which includes Glendale, Burbank, the San Fernando Valley, Santa Clarita, and Antelope Valley. So basically we have a 2,500 square mile area, and we actually serve about 6% of all the children receiving child care subsidies in California. So we're one of the largest agencies. I have a staff of about 500. Half are in Head Start. The other half are doing resource and referral and alternative payment programs. I'm skipping a lot of what I was going to say, but what I over the last couple of years, with all of the cuts that we've seen, we've been directly impacted by operational costs, what euphemistically gets called admin, but it really isn't admin. It's really our operation cost to actually service all these families and all the children. And our costs have been cut by about almost 13% from what we had 2 years ago. Also, because it's based on a percentage of the payments that we send out, and with license exempt payments being cut significantly last year, our caseloads have actually increased to being 50% larger than what they were a year ago. So we've still managed to maintain a professional level of service, but with any additional cuts to any of the programs, at best we'll see a lower level of service as staff who can find other jobs will leave because of the uncertainty of funding. As the economy gets better, our better staff are looking around and saying, we can find something else to do, and we don't have to be quite so worried about what's going to happen. So we're going to lose our best trained case managers, our supervisors, and our managers, and we're already beginning to see that happening, and that leaves us at risk for additional errors that we might make that we wouldn't have been making with better staff. Did want to speak for a second about the proposal to reduce the number, to eliminate people who are attending college. We have 969 families that are attending college that will lose care, leaving 1,623 children without care. Also, reducing the eligibility to the 200th percentile of the federal poverty level will eliminate another 212 children. These are already on top of the cuts that low-income working families have taken over the last couple of years, and they're short-term solutions that guarantee a perpetual underclass. According to the 2011 U.S. Census, a female high school graduate earns $29,150, while a female college graduate earns $46,830. So investing in mothers with young children who are attending school so that they'll be better able to get a good job and ensure that their children are ready for kindergarten makes sense. Creating more welfare and homeless mothers and children does not. I think one of the facts that you've been asking about and that no one's actually been able to answer, and I'm not sure I can either, but being a recovering researcher, we did go out and, for many years now, yeah, I got out, yeah. We surveyed our 14 largest market-based child care centers last week, and that we asked them what would be the impact of these cuts, and 35% of them, 5 of them, said that they would not be able to continue providing care and would close their programs. So that's a loss of 597 spaces just in our little service area. That's an impact on non-subsidized working families who are put at risk because they lose their jobs because their child care went away. So that's something that I hadn't heard anybody say. So, and I know that's something that you ask. So, we're finding it was about a little over 35%. We've also seen in the last 2 years a loss of 1,000 licensed family child care homes in our service area, and 130 centers have closed because already the costs have gone down so much, and that the subsidy, they weren't just serving subsidized children, they were serving working families, but without the subsidy families, they've lost the glue that held them together, and so that's really been a problem. I wanted to thank you for the actions that you took today, especially around realignment. And I just wanted to give you one little factoid about that you might find useful. LA County AP agencies contract with the Los Angeles Department of Public Social Services. I've been the lead negotiator of those contracting for the last, I think, 6 years. We took 3 years to negotiate this most recent contract. And so, the question of, well, if you change things in a year or two, we would need a whole lot more time than that to have a system put back into place to be able to manage that. We also looked last year in this last negotiation over the county taking back the eligibility determinations and actually the authorization of child care. And when we really sat down and looked at it, we figured out that countywide it took 12 staff to authorize all the families that we authorized on it, every month. And the county figured that they would need 22 staff to do the same job. So now we pay less than the county pays. We don't have pension plans. We have a little bit of, you put some of your payment away for retirement. Maybe we match it on good years, but we've had to stop doing that. And so the costs aren't just 2 to 1 because it's twice as many people, but it's probably 3 to 1 because of the loaded cost of the county. And I thought that that was something that really hasn't been mentioned. Also, I was in Washington last week, and I have to tell you that federally the government is looking and asking, so how do we get more subsidized children into quality settings? So that's something that is going on nationally. That was the big discussion last week. They're really looking at trying to move more into quality settings so that they get the parents working and the children learning, and that seems to be the national trend, and we're sort of trying to move the opposite direction. So. And I think somebody said about where you have to cut the money, where could it come from? Well, the rainy day fund. If you left the $500 million in there, for child care, we wouldn't be in this situation, and that's what we would be suggesting. So we're really interested in looking at ways of streamlining the current system. I think you heard that theme over and over again. My colleagues and I are more than willing to work with the legislature and the governor to preserve and improve a system that's been in existence for many years. But starting over at this point in time, because of budget cuts, just doesn't seem to make sense to me and to most of my colleagues.
Thank you very much. That was really very interesting and well worth the wait. To our panel, I want to thank you. Do you have a question?
I do. When you mentioned the county takes 2 or 3 times more people to do it, in this realignment, in this proposal, what changes? You no longer do that? You're no longer in business, or what would happen?
You don't know. That's part of it. It's the unknown. It could be that the county would contract with us and that everything would stay the same. But that's not the case in every county in the state. I think it's 31 out of 58 counties contract for stage 1. But if the county had the entire shooting match, as it were, they may change their minds in terms of contracting with the local APs. I kind of think that our county probably wouldn't, but I'm not sure that would be the case statewide. And I'm not sure that given how difficult times are and the funding cuts that the counties are getting, that they wouldn't see this as an opportunity to keep their staff working.
And what was the 3-year negotiating with who for that contract?
We have a contract that runs for 3 years to do the stage 1 child care. We manage all of the cases for the LA Department of Public Social Services. And we usually start negotiating the next contract about a year and a half into the current one. And it took us 3 years to actually come to an agreement on this last negotiation. We actually had to extend the contract several times to get to it.
You got to be kidding me. What could possibly take that long? Did it go out to bid, or?
No, we didn't have to go out to bid, but
just negotiating back and forth over rates.
Everything from the county wanted different things, fingerprint clearances, some things that were legal, some things that weren't, that we felt weren't legal. Background checks at a level that we couldn't do, mutual indemnification. I mean, things that
stuff wouldn't be in the front end of the contract?
That's all in the front end of the contract, but we spent a lot of time discussing those things, as well as what the performance standards were and how we were going to measure them, and how many times were we going to be audited. Right now, the county comes out and audits us 4 times a year, so basically we're having to collect information for them quarterly, and then they're in our offices for about 2 weeks. So. And that was something that we felt was excessive, and that we wanted to get a little bit less, because you're spending. We literally have a staff person that all they do is pull cases so that the county can come in and audit them. So there were a lot of issues. We thought there weren't many, but it turned out that there were a lot, and it took us a very long time to come to an agreement.
Hopefully the next one won't be as long.
But that was our experience. I did want to, you had asked a question about economic impacts. And actually, no one really mentioned this, but there's at least 3 or 4 longitudinal studies that have gone on for the last, some of them as long as 40 years, that took a matched group of children, and Lynn talked about that a little bit, and they followed these families for the one study in Michigan went back, it goes back to the 60s, but there's one in North Carolina, there's one in Chicago. And these are longitudinal studies that have been going on at least 20 years. And what they found is that those children that were in the high-quality settings were more likely, and these were very low-income children, more likely to graduate high school, more likely to graduate college. They had lower special ed assignments through school, and that they had lower crime rates. And there have been a number of economists have looked at what was the economic impact, and the calculations were anywhere from $7 to $14 per dollar spent.
Yeah, my only question was just, did they control the other factors involved?
Yeah.
So, and what was it just 100% did better than it, or was
no? It wasn't 100%, but it was like what about?
It was significant, like that. It wasn't just by chance. It was like it was.
Yeah,
there were a higher proportion of kids that were in the high quality programs that looked better, 40 years out than the kids who weren't in those. So that more than what you would expect to see by chance. It wasn't like tossing a coin. There was, a significantly higher proportion. I want to say one other thing about economic impact too, and there have been some studies that have looked at how much childcare brings to the community in terms of taxes and jobs and purchasing of services and those things. So I think that's another thing that's been alluded to a little bit. But every time these programs close, not only do parents might lose access to their jobs, but you have people who are providing, food and selling different things to these programs. They're losing business, and the people working in the program, the child care teachers and providers themselves, they lose their jobs. So it's sort of a snowball effect,
right.
and we can gather it for you. There have been some really good studies looking at the economic contribution of child care to the well-being of the community.
Right. I mean, we've also laid off about 40 staff in the last year.
Well, I want to...
Do we have time for one more panel?
Well, I have a better idea.
Only if you're bringing in dinner.
I'm going to invite Assemblymember Nastande to join my my committee on high-quality early childhood education, where we can continue to hash out these issues and get it right for California. So we'll. I really thank everyone for their patience and attention. It's such an important subject, and you brought very good information here. And thank you also to the committee and staff, everyone who helped us make this a very successful hearing. And again, thank you to the public for all of their comments. They are also invaluable, giving their time to come speak to us. With that, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.